Hey guys, what's up? Yeah, I know, different hat today. Also, yes, I know about the lighting. Things are kind of dim, not exactly ideal. I know, I know. I just, trust me, it would be even worse if I didn't put that curtain over there. I'm trying to get the whole lighting thing settled. I'm hoping maybe I can get some cheap lights or something, put them right here. It would be a lot easier if I had a different desk. There's a desk that I really, really want to get my hands on, but it's gonna cost a lot, and I don't have the money. Anyway, get off tangent here. Book review. That's what it says up there, so that's what we're gonna do. It's actually 2 book reviews. I had gotten these books. Well, I was gonna say recently, but I've actually had them for a while now, over a month, more than that, and they're good books. And for those who are even just slightly interested in martial arts or martial arts history, or just essays and thoughts on its development, particularly in the Chinese end of things, I think these particular books would probably interest you. So let's try to get into this real quick. So first book we have here is wait, wrong book. Shit. Okay, this is a good book, but this is not the one that we're talking about. Okay, so the first one that okay, we got that settled. Okay, we got the books. Sorry. First one that we're going to be talking about is this one here. And it has a rather long title. Spring Autumn. The Spring and Autumn of Chinese Martial Arts, 5,000 Years. Actually, the real title is The Spring and Autumn of Chinese Martial Arts, 5,000 Years. And it's by Professor Kang Ge Wu. He's well known in China for being one of the few martial arts historians out there, someone who specifically is researching the history and origins and development of Chinese martial arts throughout China's history. You'd be surprised how very little scholarly effort there has been put into this particular field. It's only recently that we've been seeing more and more people getting into it, and that's part of the reason why a lot of misconceptions are being cleared up that are offending some people because of the myths that they've been led to believe. What's even sadder is that a lot of the stuff that they're discovering was stuff that was already discussed and talked about like back in like 1920 or so. I'm getting off target. This particular book here is actually a very, very concise collection of all the important footnotes and historical events that happened during Chinese martial arts history. It's like a tiny little encyclopedia, I guess, of Chinese martial art development, all the way from back during the BC era all the way up until now. And it goes into basically the development of certain Chinese art forms, like the first time it's been put into systematic, collections of movements, all the way up to the development of certain styles, the origins of Shaolin Temple, for instance, things like that. It's a very good little bit of reference, like a nice little reference volume, for anybody who wants to quickly look up a certain footnote in Chinese martial arts history. And a lot of effort has been put into putting this information together. I found it to be a rather, useful resource when looking at, certain events and like trying to figure out like what happened when and why it was so important, and how it was put in. Another thing I kind of like about this book, well, I shouldn't say kind of, I do like about this, is how it's put together. Like, it doesn't just go right away into the history of things. You of course you got your forewords and your introductions, but there's also a preface that goes into the definitions of certain martial arts terms, weapons, styles, things like that, which is going to be very useful for the uninitiated as well as for somebody who wants to get an idea of what they're talking about. For instance, the fact that wushu is the more commonly used term for Chinese martial arts. I know over here in the West we're used to the term kung fu or maybe Chinese boxing or something like that, but which is a term that's barely used, to be honest. But wushu is the more common term that's used, which it means strictly martial arts. And then it also goes into the different types. Basically it goes into the different names for different weapons, different classifications of styles, fist forms, postures, things like that. So when you're then reading about them in the book itself, you won't get thrown off, or you can at least go back and, like, what was this again? You can go back to the front and read the term. Oh, that's what it is. It's a nice little handy thing to kind of get the uninitiated used to what's in here. And then, of course, there is a glossary of terms in the end. You got a very brief Chinese chronology in the back as well, a map of China, things like that. It's useful, for somebody who's just diving into this. And like I said, it's a nice little Cliff Notes version of martial arts history. One caveat I have to throw about this book, though. Notice that I said it's very concise. This book's pretty thin. The whole thing only comes up to about, say, in fact, it's just a little over 100 pages. So when I say this thing is concise, I mean it's concise. That means there's going to be certain things that are only like certain footnotes in here when they're going into it that's barely a paragraph. Some of them are just a sentence. Like, for instance, AD 969, the second year of Kai Bao, the Southern Song Dynasty. Feng Jixing and others produced rockets for the first time using gunpowder invented during the Tang Dynasty. That's it. That's all it's going to say. Nothing about, what made him decide to start producing rockets, whether it was effective during that time period or not, though I'm assuming it was. It's just a very short Cliff Notes of that. If you want to know more, you're going to have to look it up. You're going to have to search other research materials. Like I said, this is just little blurbs, quick little footnotes. It's giving you a chronology of how things develop in martial arts. By the way, notice that it's talking about rockets because martial arts is warfare. This is not just simply talking about fighting with fists. People have to understand that martial arts are the arts of war. It's not just about dancing around in a ring, punching each other to death. Well, punching each other to bruising so that you can get a championship. No, this is going to the history of the development of Chinese warfare, and wushu or kung fu is just a part of that. So this goes into all of it. So yeah, for the researcher, not a bad little tool, but realize that it's a very concise version and it's also very dry. This is some of the driest reading that I think I've gone through. I'm used to it, but for some people it may not be an easy read, especially since, like I said, it's just these short little blurbs and that's it. Still a good bit of resource material. I recommend getting it. It's cheap anyway. Now the second book, this is the one that I've been taking with me to work. This is the one that I constantly keep coming back to because it is a really good series of thoughts and essays and just writings on Chinese martial arts in general, written by somebody who knows what they're talking about. And that's this one right here. This one is called Lone Sword Against the Cold, Cold Sky. Principles and Practice of Traditional Kung Fu by Adam Hsu. Now, anybody who's been on this channel, especially recently, knows that I really, really respect this particular martial arts teacher. He's one of the few guys out there who's very practical minded when it comes to Chinese martial arts and how to train in it, how to use it, things like that. He doesn't give in to a lot of the mysticism that's out there. He doesn't believe in all the, all the stuff that people tend to equate with it, like, special powers and chi and all that. To him, that's nonsense. To him, the only thing that really matters is hardcore training and practice, and that's it. That's what's going to yield results. And he's all about the practical applications of these martial arts. This is not to say that, he doesn't believe that you can practice it for health. In fact, he has stated many, many times that these days we don't use martial arts for warfare anymore, and that these days it's perfectly fine to practice it just for your general health and well-being or to gain a better understanding of yourself. But he still believes that fundamentally Chinese martial arts were originally meant for combat, and therefore even if you're not practicing it for that very reason, you should still at the very least be training in that way and be able to use it if the situation arises. Otherwise, you're not doing Kung Fu. I appreciate that, and that particular mindset is pretty much what's driving this book. The thing I really like about this particular piece is that the whole book is a collection of articles and essays and chapters from other things that he had written before. He's actually a pretty prolific writer, at least, as far as Chinese martial arts is concerned. It's just that we really haven't seen that much from him here in the West. He's written a lot of stuff in Chinese. I mean, he's well known in Taiwan and even mainland China. There are people there who have picked up his works and they say, oh, this guy knows what he's talking about. But here in the West, we picked up a couple of articles here and there from magazines. And then he has this other book, the Sword Polisher's Record, which I had recommended before. You can pretty much consider this book to be like a super version of of the Sword Polisher's Record. Mixing up titles here. Just like that book was a collection of, different writings and essays, this is pretty much the same thing, but much, much bigger. And it actually it's just a nice little handy guide of his thoughts on different aspects of Chinese martial arts. And it's, it's nicely put into different sections and different chapters so that you can just flip to whatever particular part that you want to get to. This is one of those books that reading it from beginning to end, cover to cover, is a good idea. But it's also one of those things that you can just flip right to where you want to read about. Like, for instance, like I said, it's divided into different chapters, like different sections, and each section happens to correspond to a different aspect of Chinese martial arts. So in the beginning, it's foundations, and it's just on basics and how important they are and good ways to practice the basics. Then the second section is on Chang Chuan, or long fist, and his thoughts on how effective long fist is, why it's a good style, its characteristics, things like that. Then the third section is Tai Chi Chuan, the misunderstood martial art, and that's a rather big section. In fact, it's probably the biggest section in here, because the fact that he says Tai Chi Chuan, the misunderstood martial art, lets you know right away what he's thinking of its current standing in the world today, and he has a whole lot to talk about with that. Things like what he considers to be a really good version of Tai Chi to practice, how to practice it, misconceptions in it, how to make your Tai Chi good, things like that. Fourth section's on Bagua Zhang, my favorite art, one of my favorites anyway. And again, how it developed, his own thoughts about it and things like that, how to practice it. I'm pretty sure you get the idea. And then the fifth section is on styles and weapons. So he talks about a couple of different styles, how weapon sparring needs to be brought back in a big way in Chinese martial arts. He has a chapter on the straight sword itself, the Dian, good stuff. And finally, the last section is just on miscellaneous observations on, and how he thinks Chinese martial arts should be practiced in the future, the new millennium, and so on. Another cool thing about the book is almost every section, say almost, not all of them, but the Chang Chuan section, the Tai Chi section, the Bagua Zhang section, he happens to have a part in the very beginning of each one is a In Search of Kung Fu Roots section, which is a detailing of his trip out to mainland China to research the martial arts that he personally practices, so he can gain a better understanding of where it came from and where it's going and how it's supposed to be practiced and who were the people who practiced it. It's really cool because it goes to show just how far he's gone in trying to research these arts, how they really developed, how they're actually supposed to be practiced, and so on. And I can tell that these sections in each, these intros in each beginning part were part of one long article, but nicely divided up to correspond with what section they're put in the book. And it makes for an interesting introduction there, what he found out about how it developed and how he thinks, things have developed along, his own views and, his own opinions and feelings and such, before going right on into it. It gives a nice little history lesson on those things, and it kind of prepares you for what is going to go on in the section. I thought that was a nice touch. This is, by the way, as big as this book is, I found it to be a very easy read, a much easier read than this, because as this is pretty much just like a bunch of quick historical paragraphs and bullet points, like I said, it's like a Cliff's Notes version of history. This collection of essays and thoughts and even bits of history, as well as ideas on how to practice and all that, it's written with this wry and kind of lightly humorous style. Like every now and then there's little tiny quick-witted parts that may get a chuckle out of you. He just, and not only that, but it's just punctuated by these just little thoughts that just you can't help but go, yeah, that's damn right. You find yourself kind of it's almost like reading a conversation that he's trying to have with you. So it makes it for a very easy read. You get more of a sense of the type of teacher he is, and you also get a sense that he really knows what he's talking about. It's a very entertaining read. It's also one of those type of books that you're going to come back to again and again, and every time you reread a certain section, you might gain a new insight into the art you practice. Or even if you don't practice these arts at all, it will still give you a bit of an insight into these arts themselves and gives a more realistic idea of how these things are, supposed to be. Never mind what you see in the movies. This gives you a better idea of what these arts are all about. One of my favorite things is that he really is against a lot of the infighting that goes on in Chinese martial arts. Like you get that throughout the book. Like he seems to have a bit of dismay at all the lineage fighting, like who's better than who's more real than who. Like he seems to be against that. Like one funny line he wrote was, for instance, he was talking about this really old Baguazhang guy that other people were like, oh, his Baguazhang's not real. We don't know what his lineage is. And his standpoint was like, this is an old Shifu, who's been around, back when these arts were still basically being used. Instead of arguing over whose lineage is better than others, wouldn't it be better to learn from old guys like this while they're still alive? Stuff like that. It just, brought a chuckle to me, and it just goes to show just how good the book is, in my opinion. And he's also against what he considers to be the modernization of Chinese martial arts. Like he believes that Chinese martial arts should be modernized, because like these days we have a different mindset, and he believes that there's certain aspects of Chinese martial arts that, old practices and old thoughts that we need to do away with. But at the same time, there's certain aspects of it that he feels that they should not have gotten rid of. Like for instance, modern wushu, contemporary wushu, he doesn't like at all. He doesn't have any good things to say about it at all. Like to him, it's like that's the wrong way to go about modernizing. He gives his own thoughts on how to properly modernize, and I think they're rather interesting. So, all in all, I think these two particular books right here are definitely worth getting. I picked them up from publishing at a good price. You might want to get it from there, if not from Amazon or other places, because they do sell them there. I recommend this one more for the diehard researcher. If you're just somebody with a casual interest in Chinese martial arts, this may be a little too dry and too concise for you. Because this is one of those books that's like just a handy tool to just quickly look something up and like, oh, that's what happened at that year, or, geez, I forgot what year this is. Oh, there you go. I mean, it's still filled with a lot of stuff that you may not know, because it's not the type of information that's, like, you'd be amazed how many Chinese martial artists do not know anything about what's in this book. So, for anybody who's interested in that, yeah, but this is not a light, casual read. I have to warn you about that. This one is definitely one that I recommend for somebody who thinks deeply about Chinese martial arts and about their practice and would like to read something from an experienced practitioner who is not just simply knowledgeable about how to apply it, but also has a scholarly mind and can actually, articulate their thoughts in a, very intelligent way, as well as a rather light-hearted way that makes for an easy read. If I do have to give a caveat about this book, however, I forgot to get into that, it would be the fact that, like I said, it's a collection of articles that he had written elsewhere. And if you are like me and you've tried to look up as much as you possibly can from this guy, you will bump into things you've read before. So you'll be like, yeah, I already read that. But to be honest, there's a lot of stuff that was written in here that I don't even think was in English. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I have read that's in English, but there's a lot of other stuff that I had not encountered. And so that made this book very, valuable to me anyway. It's still a lot of good stuff, and I recommend this for anybody. This is one that I would recommend more to even somebody who's not into Chinese martial arts, but is simply interested in it and would like to get a more realistic view of it. Definitely this. If you practice Chinese martial arts, definitely pick this up. There is something in here for you that will make you think deeper about your practice, and I think it's well worth the investment. So, that's it. This is actually my third time recording this, trying to condense everything, and that's as short as it's going to get. You should have seen how long my other takes were. So, hopefully, you get something out of this. If you do get the book, I hope you enjoy it because they're good. They're worth it. This is giving me ideas for videos. And this is definitely giving me ideas for videos as well as my own practice. So, yeah. So, hope this was useful to you guys. Catch you guys later.